Welcome to the final and most ambitious part of Ogerudi's theory of electromagnetic consciousness. In this presentation, we step beyond intuition, beyond geometry, and into the first full mathematical and computational implementation of consciousness as a gauge-theoretic phenomenon. This slide introduces a unified trifield framework for brain activity. A classical U1 electromagnetic field carrying energy. A hidden SU2 informational field encoding structural relations. And a nonlinear mediator field that forces them in. At the heart of this theory lies a radical departure from traditional neuroscience. Consciousness is not emergent computation, it is a dressed electromagnetic state. This slide breaks open the underlying physics. The U1 electromagnetic field obeys classical gauge symmetry and carries energy through brain tissue. The SU2 field represents internal information, meaning, state relations, or semantic structure, and follows non-abelian symmetry rules. The mediator field couples them nonlinearly, ensuring that energy, structure, and meaning do not drift apart but instead stabilize into one coherent experiential unity. This slide explains why classical EM alone cannot explain consciousness. The brain requires a dressed interaction that binds computation, meaning, and phenomenology into a single physical entity. This is the first formal language in physics capable of describing unity of mind. This slide lays out the scaffolding behind this revolution. Here we see how the three fields, electromagnetic, informational, and mediator, are not independent pieces but variationally bound into a single dynamical system. Three Lagrangians, one for each field, are tied together and minimized under a unified action principle. This is groundbreaking because it yields a closed-form physical law for consciousness evolution. Consciousness is not posited. It emerges as the stable dynamical solution of this trifield equation. This slide is where neuroscience stops being circuitry and becomes physics. A world where brains operate through interacting gauge fields, not just spikes and synapses. Here we reveal the mathematical engine of awareness. This slide shows that the dressed field system is not assumed. It is derived from a variational law, meaning consciousness is the configuration that minimizes action in this coupled field space. The slide's formulation explains the internal choreography. 1. Electromagnetic fields propagate and interfere. 2. The SU2 information field reorganizes, aligning along brain connectivity and meaning structures. 3. The mediator field deepens energetic wells, preventing decoherence and stabilizing states. The outcome is the first self-assembled, stable configuration capable of holding and integrating information. A physical analog of a conscious state. This slide reveals how awareness becomes a mathematically permitted attractor. This slide zooms in on the electromagnetic field. Using the Euler-Lagrange method, the model extracts the U1 evolution law, proving that EM fields in the brain obey a computed, not assumed, equation when part of the dressed trifield system. This makes electromagnetism an active actor in consciousness dynamics, not passive background activity. In this slide, the same variational machinery is applied to the SU2 information field. Here, information becomes a physical quantity governed by field evolution. The mediator field emerges as the stabilizer, a nonlinear channel ensuring that EM dynamics and information structure bind and co-evolve. This slide explains why awareness is not fragile or fleeting. The mediator mechanism allows experiences to stabilize and persist long enough to be lived. This slide closes the mathematical cycle. All three fields, EM, SU2, and mediator, now generate a set of coupled field equations. At this point the theory becomes closed, self-consistent, and ready for simulation. Consciousness is officially defined as a physically allowed regime of gauge invariance, nonlinear trifield coupling, and stable field solutions. This slide marks the transition from mathematics to embodiment. This slide makes the theory tangible. Here, on a curved cortical surface, blue curves represent EM propagation. Green curves trace mediator trajectories. SU2 information fields appear as spherical influence zones. Where they intersect, the model predicts a high-density energy core. A red hotspot representing elevated field energy T_00 X. Small arrows designate T_0I, the energy information flux flowing across cortex. This gives the first physical signature of conscious excitation zones, predicted from field dynamics, not abstractions. This slide moves from equations to architecture. The brain's curved geometry, CSF boundaries, and volumetric space are discretized. Each computational voxel carries electromagnetic parameters. SU, field terms. Mediator dynamics. The trifield equations evolve numerically, building a digital brain where conscious states can form. This slide describes how the full system is evolved. Finite difference time domain solvers propagate electromagnetism. Lattice-Yang-Mills solvers evolve SU, structure. A nonlinear mediator solver preserves coherence. This is the first computational engine capable of evolving consciousness equations within realistic brain geometry. This slide links theory to experiment. The dressed field model predicts measurable surface signatures, stable topographies, coherent phase structures, nonlinear cross-frequency coupling visible in EEG and MEG. This means Ogerudi's theory is testable and falsifiable. The mark of a genuine scientific framework. Here you can see how the theory connects directly to EEG and MEG. For EEG, the voltage at the scalp reflects the scalar part of the dressed electromagnetic field, and simulations show conscious state features, stronger global phase coherence, persistent network patterns, and nonlinear modulation, matching real findings like alpha-gamma synchronization and broad perceptual coherence. And here you can see the MEG counterpart. The magnetic field arises from the dressed vector potential, producing coherent field structures, long-range correlations, and sensitivity to SU. Information dynamics, effects classical EM cannot account for but modern MEG can measure. Together, this slide shows EEG and MEG as experimental windows into electromagnetic consciousness, providing measurable signatures of the field state predicted by the model. This slide marks the transition from theory to reality by presenting three converging insights. First, the model makes precise experimental predictions. Consciousness should appear as strengthened long-range coherence when awake, collapse when anesthetized, exhibit nonlinear amplitude phase coupling that classical EM cannot explain, and persist as a field structure even when neural firing shifts. Second, it explains altered states through the same physics. Wakefulness corresponds to a stable trifield regime, sleep weakens mediator coupling, anesthesia destroys coherence entirely, and pathological conditions lead partial instability. Third, it opens a technological frontier. If consciousness is a field state, imaging must evolve to detect it, inspiring coherence-based scanners, electromagnetic biomarkers, hybrid microwave instruments, and field-level awareness monitors. Together, the slide argues that Ogerudi's model is not just theoretical. It delivers testable signatures, explanatory reach, and engineering pathways, showing consciousness as something we can observe, measure, and eventually manipulate. On this slide, the theory enters its two deepest territories, what consciousness means philosophically, and what it enables clinically. On the left, we face the philosophical shift. Consciousness is no longer something immaterial floating above biology. It becomes a field configuration embedded in physical law. A measurable structure woven through brain tissue and spacetime. Unity, identity, and continuity are no longer mysteries. They arise from stabilized electromagnetic informational patterns. Then the slide turns to the right column, the clinical horizon. If consciousness is a physical field state, it can be monitored, perturbed, and treated. New tools emerge, biomarkers for coma, coherence-based anesthesia tracking, diagnostic signatures of awareness, and human-machine interfaces that communicate through fields rather than spikes. This slide makes its message clear. The theory is not metaphysics. It is applied electromagnetic consciousness physics, transforming philosophical insight into future medical technology. In summary, Ogerudi's dressed gauge field theory is the first scientific framework that defines consciousness mathematically, derives its equations, implements them computationally, predicts measurable biosignatures, and opens engineering pathways. It advances a new thesis: consciousness is a dynamically stabilized electromagnetic information field. The next steps are clear: simulations grow more detailed, experimental validation intensifies, and field-aware technologies begin to emerge. This is not a metaphorical shift. It is the beginning of a physics of consciousness, where mind enters the territory of model, measurement, and eventually, technology.